Welcome. How is everybody? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Just a second. Let me fix something just the real fast. Okay. Make sure that is set up and that is set up. Okay, good. You think you are prepared until you hit the record button, and then you find out you're not prepared because I've already done this intro once. And I've done half of this video once to find out that it was not prepared correctly. So now I'm going to try it again. So anyway, welcome. I hope everybody is doing well. I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving holiday, because today it is 11/28 of 2022, and we are coming back into the work week after a long holiday break for the Thanksgiving holiday. And I hope everybody had a great holiday. If they celebrate the Thanksgiving, hopefully you guys were fed well and your family didn't drive you crazy. So, with all that said, welcome to Rush to Judgment with Jessica, and I'm Jessica. And today we are just, doing the same old, listening to me talk about my thoughts and opinions and on some things. And, well, y'all, we found another trial. And to be quite honest, we only found this trial because I noticed that it was done by a judge that I have seen do a couple trials, and I like him. So that's why I picked it. It's not a 10-year-old trial. It's not a 4-year-old trial. It happened in 2019. So, I mean, it's relatively current, but not too current. Maybe some people watched it, maybe some people didn't. But it is a Florida case. So, that makes things interesting, just for the simple fact that in Florida cases, death penalty is on the table, but I don't think it is in this case. So this is a case for a young woman named Nicole Nachtman. She is charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder for unaliving her mom and stepfather in August of 2015. And yes, so the incident happened in 2015, and the trial took place in late July, August of 2019. So it took it a while to get up and going. I believe there were some psych evals that took place for Miss Nachtman, competency and whatnot. She claimed some mental health issues. She claimed some past trauma issues. I'm not exactly sure what the defense is going to bring up, what they're not. That was just something I read in an article, so I don't know what all will be brought up in this trial as her defense or what. So that should be interesting. But like I said, I picked this case because of the judge that is overseeing the trial. I'm not sure his name, but I like him. He seems very fair and very, I don't know. I feel like he's fair in his judgments, and he weighs both sides. I don't know if anybody watched the more recent cases that he did. It was the Matthew Terry trial and the Trevor Summers trial. in Florida. Matthew Terry was more recent, and then before that it was the Trevor Summers. They were both pretty interesting cases. I did not cover those. I watched them, but I did not cover them. So yeah, I just thought he was a pretty cool judge. So that's what I caught my attention, and then it just so happened that it seemed like a pretty interesting case. So that was my thought process on it. In depth, I guess. It caught my attention, and I said, cool, let's try it. And so there we go. So we're going to start out with jury instructions, and then we're going to go right into opening statements. The state's going to go first, then defense is going to go first, and then we get into the first witness for the state. And I believe that would conclude the first day of the trial. So strap in and let's get her going. And I'm gonna fast forward as much, well, not fast forward, but play it pretty fast through the jury instructions, because I mean, we've all heard jury instructions before, and they're pretty basic, and we're not part of the jury, so it doesn't apply to us. So, oh shit. It would help if you do this, ma'am. Okay. And they'll put me down here in the corner. And then we press play.
There was a movie where I think someone said, I need a bigger boat. I think I need a bigger courtroom. What's that? For a bigger courtroom? Only one is bigger. And that's the Chiefs. Okay. I want to see that. Let me just ask both sides.
He just seems so jolly.
Some people were excluded from the courtroom because every seat in the courtroom is taken. So I just want to make sure that there isn't anybody that either side wanted.
And I've never seen him get mad,
really. That we need to address and
just
I'm going to throw somebody out to get them in. But I also, at the same time, want to make sure there isn't somebody in the courtroom who shouldn't be in the courtroom. I don't know if the rule has been invoked.
It will be as of right now, Judge.
All right, so the rule has now been invoked. So if there's anybody who is in the courtroom who is a witness in this case, you cannot remain in the courtroom. I'll rely on both sides to scan the crowd and see if you see anybody who is one of your witnesses. It does not look like anybody is volunteering that they are a witness.
None of the defense witnesses are in the courtroom. Neither are safe.
All right, excellent. I will then ask you to relay the invocation of the rule and its requirements to your witnesses. State, I know that you have some witnesses outside that are ready to testify. As soon as closing arguments are completed, I will ask you to call your first witness and we'll begin the testimony.
We're checking out there.
All right, go ahead. I'll give you a few moments.
You can go check over.
Bob's probably settling them, so it's going to take a minute. He had to walk around the back and put him in the room. But other than that, is the state ready?
Yes, sir.
Is the defense ready?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Holt, will you be giving the opening for the defense?
Yes, sir.
And for the state, who's giving the opening? Mr. Terry? All right. And we already went over 2.1 and 2.1A I have in front of me. When we bring them in, I'll welcome them back. I will tell them that they're going to get I'll give them 2.1A and then allow the state to begin with the opening statement. And the defense to follow. Deputy Oliver, can you radio Deputy Ward just to make sure he knows that we're ready for the jury? He might have thought that it was going to take us longer. I'll let the record reflect that everyone is present, including the defendant, Ms. Nachtman. State still ready?
Yes, sir.
Defense still ready?
Yes, sir.
All right. Jury is present and seated. Everyone else may be seated this time, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Welcome back. Good afternoon. First and foremost, I want to confirm, because I always tell people in my panel that they sit out there in those hard benches, that the seats here in the jury box are much more comfortable. Can I confirm that you're more comfortable there?
Yes.
All right. Well, that's good, because that's where you will be for the next 2 weeks for this trial. You also will come and go from this door, and the bailiffs will have some additional instructions for you about how we start court in the morning and all those types of things, where to meet them. As I indicated during jury selection, the court would have instructions for you throughout the course of the trial. The first instructions that I have for you this afternoon are titled preliminary instructions. They're not very long, but I am going to read them to you. They are written by the Florida Supreme Court, and every word of them is important. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you have been selected and sworn as the jury to try the case of State of Florida versus Nicole Nachtman. This is a criminal case. Nicole Nachtman is charged with 2 counts of murder in the first degree, premeditated with a firearm. The definition of murder in the first degree, premeditated with a firearm, will be explained to you later. The state's charging document, which is called an indictment, is not evidence and is not to be considered by you as any proof of guilt. It is the judge's responsibility to explain the law to you. It is your solemn responsibility to determine if the state proved its accusation beyond a reasonable doubt against Nicole Nachtman in accordance with the law that I provide to you. Thus, the province of the jury and the province of the court are well defined, and they do not overlap. This is one of the fundamental principles of our system of justice. Before proceeding further, it will be helpful if you understand how a trial is conducted. At the beginning of the trial, the attorneys will have an opportunity, if they wish, to make an opening statement. The opening statement gives the attorneys a chance to tell you what evidence they believe will be presented during the trial. What the lawyers say is not evidence, and you are not to consider it as such. Following the opening statements, witnesses will be called to testify under oath. They will be examined and cross-examined by the attorneys. Documents and other exhibits also may be produced as evidence. After the evidence has been presented, the attorneys will have the opportunity to make their closing arguments. Following the closing arguments by the attorneys, the court will instruct you on the law applicable to the case. After the final instructions are given, you will then retire to consider your verdict. You should not form any definite or final opinion on the merits of the case until you have heard all the evidence, the argument of the lawyers, and the instructions on the law by the judge. Until that time, you should not discuss the case among yourselves. Your verdict must be based solely on the evidence or lack of evidence and the law. I now instruct you not to communicate with anyone, including your fellow jurors, about this case. No communication includes no emailing, text messaging, tweeting, blogging, or any other form of communication. You cannot do any research about the case or look up any information about the case. If you become aware of any violation of any of these rules at all, notify court personnel of the violation. During the course of the trial, the court may take recesses, and you will be permitted to separate and go about your personal affairs. During these recesses, you must not discuss the case with anyone, nor permit anyone to say anything to you or in your presence about the case. If anyone attempts to say anything to you or in your presence about this case, tell him or her that you are on the jury trying the case and ask that person to stop. If he or she persists, leave that person at once and immediately report the matter to the bailiff, who will advise me. All cell phones, computers, tablets, or other types of
Tell them,
electronic
say,
devices
please don't
must
do
be turned
that.
off while you are in the courtroom. Turned off means that the phone or other electronic device is actually off and not in a silent or vibrating mode. You may use these devices during recesses, but even then, you may not use your cell phone or electronic device to find out any information about the case or communicate with anyone about the case or the people involved in the case. Do not take photographs, video recordings, or audio recordings of the proceedings or of your fellow jurors. After each recess, please double check to make sure your cell phone or electronic device is turned off. At the end of the case, while you are deliberating, you must not communicate with anyone outside the jury room. You cannot have in the jury room any cell phones, computers, or other electronic devices. If someone needs to contact you in an emergency, the court can receive messages and will deliver them to you without delay. A contact phone number will be provided to you. The case must be tried by you only on the evidence presented during the trial, in your presence, and in the presence of the defendant, the attorneys, and the judge. Jurors must not conduct any investigation of their own. This includes reading newspapers, watching television, or using a computer, cell phone, the internet, any electronic device, or any other means at all to get information related to this case or the people and places involved in this case. This applies whether you are in the courthouse, at home, or anywhere else. You must not visit places mentioned in the trial or use the internet to look at maps or pictures to see any place discussed during the trial. Jurors must not have discussions of any sort with friends or family members about the case or the people and places involved. Do not let even the closest family member make comments to you or ask questions about the trial. In this age of electronic communication, I want to stress again that just as you must not talk about this case face to face, you must not talk about this case by using an electronic device. You must not use phones, computers, or other electronic devices
First
to
rule
communicate.
of
Do not send or accept
jury.
any messages related to this case or your jury service. Do not
We do
discuss
not
this case
talk
or
about the
ask for
jury.
advice by any means at all, including posting information on an internet website, chat room, or blog. What are the reasons for these rules? These rules are imposed because jurors must decide the case without distraction and only on the evidence presented in the courtroom. If you investigate, research, or make inquiries on your own, the trial judge has no way to make sure that the information you obtain is proper for the case. The parties likewise have no opportunity to dispute or challenge the accuracy of what you find. That is contrary to our judicial system, which assures every party the right to ask questions about and challenge the evidence being considered against it, and to present argument with respect to that evidence. Any independent investigation by a juror unfairly and improperly prevents the parties from having that opportunity our judicial system promises. Any juror who violates these restrictions jeopardizes the fairness of these proceedings, and a mistrial could result that would require the entire trial process to start over. A mistrial is a tremendous expense and inconvenience to the parties, the court, and the taxpayers. If you violate these rules, you may be
So if
held
you
in contempt of
violate
court
it,
and face
you're gonna
sanctions
cost
such as serving time in jail,
money.
paying a fine,
It's gonna
or both. In every criminal
your
proceeding,
fault.
a defendant has the absolute right to remain silent. At no time is it the duty of a defendant to prove his or her innocence. From the exercise of a defendant's right to remain silent, a jury is
No,
not permitted
the
to draw
state
any
has the
inference
burden.
of guilt, and the fact that a defendant did not take the witness stand must not influence your verdict in any manner whatsoever. The attorneys are evidence and procedure, and it is their duty to make all objections they feel are proper. When an objection is made, you should not speculate on the reason why it is made. Likewise, when an objection is sustained or upheld by me, you must not speculate on what might have occurred had the objection not been sustained, nor what a witness might have said had he or she been permitted to answer. During the trial, it may be necessary to confer with the attorneys out of your hearing to discuss matters that require consideration by me alone. It is impossible to predict when such a conference may be required or how long it will last. When such conferences do occur, they will be conducted so as to consume as little of your time as is necessary for a fair and orderly trial of the case. If you would like to take notes during the trial, you may do so. On the other hand, of course, you are not required to take notes if you do not want to. That will be left up to you individually. You have been provided with a notepad and pen for use if you wish to take notes. Any notes that you take will be for your personal use. However, you should not take them with you from the courtroom. During recesses, the bailiff will take possession of your notes and will return them to you when we reconvene. After you have completed your deliberations, the bailiff will deliver your notes to me. They will be destroyed. No one will ever read your notes. If you do take notes, do not get so involved in note-taking that you become distracted from the proceedings. Your notes should be used only as aids to your memory. Whether or not you take notes, you should rely on your memory of the evidence, and you should not be unduly influenced by the notes of other jurors. Notes are not entitled to any greater weight than each juror's memory of the evidence. That is all of the preliminary instructions. Let me just verify with you, we recycle our pens, so they run out of ink eventually. I want everyone to take their pen out and take it for a test drive and let us know if you need a new pen because yours is not working.
Take it for a test
I'm going
drive.
to let you know that if any time during the course of the trial, your pen runs out of ink, do not be shy. Raise your hand, get my attention, Deputy DeVore's attention, or any other bailiff who's sitting close to you, and they have a supply of pens and will be able to get you a new pen. And now I'm going to ask the state if they are ready to present their opening statement.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Chair, you may proceed.
Don't be shy. Let them
On
know.
August 20th of 2015, Miriam Deans was returning home after a few days off at Jacksonville. Not off, I should say. She was actually working. She's working with the Navy. She was on assignment. She'd been recently promoted to captain. She was coming to what she thought was her home. But in reality, ladies and gentlemen, she was walking into a trap. A trap that was set up by this woman right over here. Her own daughter, Nicole Nachtman. You see, ladies and gentlemen, the evidence will show that on August 20th of 2015, Nicole Nachtman had decided that rather than dealing with a strict, demanding mom, a mom who she could not feel like she could please, she decided to eliminate her from her life. Did she run away to do that? No. Did she go seek help from family to do that? No. She put 3 bullets into her mom.
Jesus.
The evidence will show that on August 20th of 2015, the defendant was a young woman who was having problems handling responsibility. She liked to be on the computer. She liked to live in her anime world and just spend her time on the computer, blogging and doing things like that. She was slipping in her grades at school, even though her mom is providing her everything she needed to succeed. And one thing happened later this time that will kind of precipitate all this. She failed to get her housing for her junior year at Florida State. She failed to submit the paperwork she was required to submit.
Oh,
So
dear.
rather than face the anger of her mom, she decided to kill her.
Well,
But
that
there was
seems
one person in the way of
reasonable.
that plan, one person in the way of her finally taking care of getting rid of her mom. And that person was a man who just happened to be living in the same house, who happened to be married to her mom, her stepdad, Robert Deans. So Robert Deans, he was a retired police officer that the mother and Robert Deans had met in Virginia and had married, and he had moved down here to Carrollwood with Ms. Nachtman and her mom, Miriam. So in order to kind of understand how we got here, let's talk a little background on what the evidence was going to show you. Let's go back to where this started. The evidence is going to show that Nicole Nachtman did not have an easy life. It was not an easy life. When she was very young, her mother and her father, Ronald Nachtman, got into a very bitter custody battle. Lasted for a while. Allegations made both ways. A difficult time for a young child being born between 2 parents. The evidence is going to show that ultimately Miriam Deans was awarded custody of Nicole Nachtman, and at the age of 4, she did not see her father again. You're going to hear that Miriam Deans, as a result of work and school and so forth, was traveling a lot. She lived in different areas of the country. She lived in Texas for a while, lived in Virginia for a while, and she lived obviously in Tampa for a while. And as a result of that, Nicole Nachtman was going to lots of different schools, not maintaining one particular school district. So clearly there was probably difficulty making friends, maintaining friends. But what you will hear also, and you will hear this from the defendant's own brother, Joseph Perry, she was a happy girl. Despite everything that was going on, she was happy. She was being provided for. He'll tell you that, mom took great care of her.
Was
She
she
had
though?
a good life, even though it was kind of crazy with the movement and stuff. And Nicole was happy, growing up normal. In his mind, She loved to dance. She loved to sing. A typical young girl. Her mother stayed very involved in Nicole's life, all her life. She continued, despite going to different schools, to do okay in school. Her grades stayed okay, and she continued to move forward and progress in her schooling. So let's fast forward to the summer of 2015. At this point in time,
Well,
Nicole
that's a
Nachtman
big
had
jump.
completed 2 years at Florida State University. Her first year, she spent part of it abroad in London. She spent a semester abroad in London, and her grades were good.
That's cool.
She got back from London, and in her second semester, her grades continued to be okay. And you'll see her transcript, and you'll see evidence of her grades. Come her sophomore year, her grades started to slip. She was getting very mixed grades. We call it that. She would get B's and then some F's, and B's and some F's. She was clearly struggling at Florida State University at that time. When she was not in school, she was living at home. It's a nice home. You're going to see pictures of it. It's a nice home in Carewood. Has a pool right on the lake. She had a couple of dogs and cats. In a nice little subdivision, a little cul-de-sac. And she lived there with Robert Deans. And Deans, her mom, stepdad.
It's always the cul-de-sac.
Also here, she had a lot of other family here in Tampa. She had some
We don't
uncles,
live in a
she had
cul-de-sac.
cousins, she had a grandmother who she often stayed at her house. Lots of people she could communicate with, talk to, and were around. So in that summer of 2015, Nicole Nachtman went to spend a month with her older brother, Joseph Carey. And you're going to hear there's a big age discrepancy. It's almost like 12 years. Now, Joseph Carey had lived in Tampa for a little while, and when his mom wanted to move to Virginia, he didn't think it was a good idea. He didn't want to go with her. So he ended up staying with his grandmother here until he graduated from high school, and he eventually joined the U.S. Air Force, where he stayed in the U.S. Air Force and continues to be working in the U.S. Air Force. He's currently now stationed in Tacoma, Washington, working for NORAD. So you're going to hear from Joseph Carey that he and Nicole Nachtman tried to spend time together during the summers, or trying to make a get together. And Ms. Deans would encourage that and would encourage Ms. Nachtman to go spend time with her. And you're going to hear from Joseph Carey that summer, she was there. She was quiet, introverted. She was constantly on her computer. And he had to struggle to get her to go out and do things. And he kind of thought, well, this is probably typical teenage, even though she's older than a teenager at this point, she's 21 years old, but something that younger people do. He got along great with her. They confided in each other. They were confidants. You will hear that they did talk from time to time about mom. But you will not hear that Nicole Nachtman ever told him one time that he abused her or did anything to her. You will hear that they did talk about typical things that brothers and sisters talk about. Oh, mom, mom, demanding mom, things along those lines. Joseph Carey, her closest person, had no clue that a month later she was going to kill his mother. So we moved to the end of the summer. August 18th, I told you Miriam Deans leaves to go to Jacksonville. You're going to see a receipt in her car from the days that she was staying at the hotel in Jacksonville, again, where she was on assignment with the Navy. She left Nicole Nachtman and her husband, Robert Deans, at the house at that time. Nicole Nachtman was supposed to be going back to FSU at this time as well. Classes were about to start, housing was opening up, kids were moving in. This was the time of the summer, obviously, when that starts to happen. So in Miriam Dean's mind, Nicole Nachtman was gone. She was heading back to school while she went to Jacksonville. Robert was home. But unbeknownst to Miriam, at this point in time, Nicole Nachtman had failed to put in her paperwork. And she had no housing. On August 18th,
Sounds
she had
familiar.
no housing. She did not want to tell
Sounds
her mom.
like another Chandler.
So on August 18th of 2015, this is where Nicole Nachtman finds herself. Enrolled at FSU, but nowhere to stay. And this, ladies and gentlemen, this is the spot where her plan takes shape. And it's just Robert Deans in the house with Nicole Nachtman. The last time Robert Deans is seen alive is on August 18th of 2015 at a Publix. You'll see that video. You'll see Mr. Deans there doing his shopping. You'll see the hat he's wearing. Blue, tightless type hat. Somewhere between the moment he left that Publix and the next morning of August 19th, Nicole Nachtman put a bullet in the back of his head and killed him instantly.
Jesus.
The person who stood between her and her ultimate goal of killing her mom had been eliminated. And the evidence is going to show you it was eliminated with his own gun. His own gun that he kept in the drawer beside his bed.
Sorry, I'm opening a bunch of mail. Hope it's not
The evidence
bothering
was shown that the next
anybody.
morning, on August 19th, Nicole Nachtman received some good news. Her housing had been approved. Paperwork had come through. She was accepted into housing, and she had overflow housing. All she needed was a $100 deposit.
Oh, well,
She
damn.
didn't have $100. Normally, she would ask mom for $100.
She didn't have to do any of
Obviously,
this.
she can't ask Robert Dean because by this point, Robert Dean is dead. And we know that, and I'll tell you why we know that in a few moments. So she calls her cousin, who lives about 2 miles north, still in Carrollwood, David Lear. And she says, "Hey, David." She calls him in the morning. "I need $100. He says, "Hey, I'm at work. I'll call you later when I get off work." He gets off, goes home around 3 o'clock, and she calls him back because he forgot to call her. And she said, "Hey, I need $100. He said, "Oh, you know what? I have it with me. Come on over." You're going to hear from David Lear. He's going to testify for you. He's going to say she came over somewhere a little bit after 3, somewhere around there. Well, we know for a fact that's true because the GPS located in Nicole Nachtman's car that was eventually downloaded shows her at David Lear's residence at 3:15. We're finding
very
exactly what
good.
David Lear said. He said he talked to her a little while. She seemed fine. She said she's heading up to Florida State. You will also hear that he spent a lot of time at the Dean's house. You will hear that he often helped Robert Deans with projects around the house. You will hear that just the Friday before, he was at the house hanging out with Miriam, Robert, and Nicole Nachtman. Everything seemed fine. You're going to hear that they were just hanging out, talking, laughing. There was an issue with Nicole Nachtman not wanting to get LASIK surgery for her eyes, and her mom was encouraging her, trying to get her to do it. So David Lear was telling her, "Oh, come on, Nicole, I've done it. I had it. It's really not as bad as you think it's going to be. It's no problem at all." That's the last real memory he has of being in that house and talking with Miriam Lear and the defense, Nicole Nachtman.
That's scary. I don't know that I would want to do it.
So he gives Nicole
Only
Nachtman
things in my
$100.
eyeballs.
Now, again, as I told you, at this time, Robert Deans is dead. Nicole Nachtman had dragged his body from where she shot him, had dragged him into a spare bedroom, covered him with a blanket, and locked him in. She had then gone about cleaning. She cleaned the kitchen floor. You're going to see that. And the evidence will show she cleaned the kitchen floor. She cleaned the area all around. So Nicole Nachtman had the money. She has the money. She's got accepted in the room at FSU. She's got a car. Could have left and abandoned this plan to kill her mother. She did not do that. The evidence will show she did not do that. After hiding the body and cleaning up the scene, Nicole Nachtman continues to set this trap for her mother. She discovers, through, we don't know where, the computer or somewhere, she discovers that Miriam Lear, who's in Jacksonville, is trying to reach Robert through email on his Yahoo account. And she's telling him, "I'm trying to reach you. I'm trying to call you. What's going on? Why aren't you responding?" The evidence is going to show that Nicole Nachtman captured that email on her phone.
He's dead.
And you're going to hear how she tried to access that Yahoo account. How she tried to change the password.
You
on
just say
Robert's account,
Yahoo?
all while he's laying dead in an adjoining room. You see, ladies and gentlemen, for this trap to work, the mom could not know she was home. In order to kill her mom, she needed to surprise her mom. She needed Robert out of the way so he couldn't protect her, and she needed her mom to be completely uncertain. So the evidence will show that on August 20th of 2015, around 5:30 in the afternoon, Nicole Nachtman moved her car to a location about 1.7 miles north of her home, near sort of where David Lear lived. And you'll see a map of it, and you'll kind of get the locations down so you'll be able to understand. And we know this, ladies and gentlemen, because of the Garmin GPS in Nicole Nachtman's car. You see, later down the road in the course of the investigation, and we'll get there in a few minutes, but down that road, her car is searched. And in that search, they find the Garmin GPS. Now, nowadays, we all have our cell phones that we use for our maps and coordinating and how to get directions and where to go. But back in 2015, I know it doesn't seem like that long ago, most cars had these little GPS things in the car. They would use. Hers would come on every time she activated her car. And the interesting thing about a Garmin GPS, and there's going to be a person who's a technician who's going to testify and talk to you about this, is that it stores the data, the GPS points of where it's been, which is easily downloaded into a Google Earth. It stores the data points of where she's been and the times that, I shouldn't say where her car had been. So we know that at 5:30, I'm sorry, what did I say? Around 5:30 that afternoon, her car leaves the house. Now remember, her mom now is leaving Jacksonville on her way home. She drives around, and you'll see their path of travel, where she goes to this little tiny cul-de-sac road, north of Ehrlich Road, far enough away from her house to be out of her immediate neighborhood, but close enough to get back and forth to. Far enough away so that the car won't be observed around the house after she kills her mom, but close enough that she can get to it and get an easy, quick exit out to get to the interstate. So with her car safely concealed and ready for an easy getaway, Nicole Nachtman goes back to the house and waits for her mom to return. You're going to hear, you're actually going to probably hear in just a little while from two of her neighbors who lived right next door, Elizabeth Ray and Wesley Rowe. They're going to tell you that on that day, they remember seeing Nicole Nachtman walking around outside. Now, at this point, we know that Robert Deans is dead inside. They remember seeing her walking around, and they thought to themselves, at least at one point, Elizabeth Ray thought it was weird that she was coming out of a garage side door. And then Mr. Rowe saw her putting like a book in an open window, and he thought that was very strange. But so that's kind of how they remembered she was there that day. So Elizabeth Ray remembers that day because that was the day of her orientation to Sickles High School. And she had been to orientation, she'd come back, and so now she's back at home. And her mom goes out for a walk, and so she's at home with her stepdad, Wesley Rowe, and they're sitting in her room, and they're just talking about things. Now we're getting to the point where the murder takes place. Now we're about 9:30 in the evening. Miriam Deans comes home, again, believing Nicole's gone, comes home, and a short while later, the neighbors hear 3 shots in a scream. Both of them decide 3 shots in a scream. Wesley Rowe will tell you that he saw a shadow run past between the 2 houses, between his house, and you're going to see pictures of all this, between his house and the Deans' house. Sees a shadow run by, can't say it, can't say anything about it, just saw someone running by. You'll hear he calls 911, and you're going to actually hear those 911 calls. He calls 911 the first time and says, hey, you guys need to get down here. I heard what I think were shots, so on and so forth. Takes a while for them to come, and as he goes, he looks out his window and sees a body in his own driveway. So now he's definitely concerned. He calls 911 back and says, hey, listen, there's a dead body on my driveway. You guys need to get over here. So the sheriff's office shows up, and you're going to hear that when they arrive, obviously, as you can imagine, shots fired with a body down on the driveway. They don't know what's going on. So they go immediately to the body, obviously, to see if the person's still alive, if the person can use some emergency medical assistance, anything like that. But they realize she's dead. And so they begin to look around to see what's going on. You got to imagine these sheriff's officers have no idea who could have done this or where it's happening from. So they're calling in, they're getting back up, people are coming, other officers are coming. So they go and they tell Mr. Rowe, call in, just, you guys stay in your house, we're going to look around, see what, and they go next door and they see that the door is open. So they kind of open it up and say, hello, is anyone here? You're going to hear from these 2 officers, and they're going to tell you how they went in there thinking, you know, is there another body here, or is there somebody else or is the person who did this hiding out in here? And they find a locked door. And so they start thinking, oh my gosh, is the person who did this locked inside that room? So they start hollering, hey, come on out, come on out. Eventually you're going to hear that they get a hoe, and they break open that door, look inside, and they find the body of Robert Deans.
You say a hoe?
And it will become apparent very quickly that Mr. Deans had been there for quite some time. A medical examiner will later confirm that the body had been there at least 24, more likely 36 hours in that room, based on the body's decomposition. So now they have a body that's been in a bedroom for a while at least dead, and another fresh body outside. So detectives arrive and investigation begins. As they're going through the evidence and calling around to find out who these people are, they find family members. And they talk to the neighbors, Mr. Rowe and Ms. Ray, and learn that they have a daughter, Nicole Nachtman. And they're like, yeah, and they tell the detectives, yeah, Nicole Nachtman was here earlier today. Now remember, at this point, the detectives know that body's been in there for at least 24 to 36 hours. So that means Nicole Nachtman must have been in that house or around that house at the time that Robert Deans was dead. So she's now immediately become a person of interest for the sheriff's office. So Detective Messer goes and meets with the family, and he first attempts and he makes a controlled phone call with Nicole Nachtman. And now you're hearing, by this point, it's the morning hours. It's you know, we're talking somewhere around 8:30 or so. He waits to call her. And you're going to hear that phone call. He calls her and he says, hey, you know, I got some news to tell you. Because at this point, while she's a person of interest, he doesn't know that she did this. So somehow or another, he's got to explain to her that her mom is dead. You'll hear the phone call and the difficulty he has in trying to explain to her, talk to her about it. And you'll hear how she says, yeah, I know, my uncle called and told me mom's been in an accident. What hospital is she in? He said, well, you know, she's not doing good. And then she asked, well, I've been here for the last 2 days. Volunteered that. Not asked, hey, you weren't here earlier or last night? Were you here? She immediately, I've been here for a couple of days. Yeah, I'm going back to school. They then do a controlled phone call with her uncle, Eric. And you'll hear that controlled phone call, and you'll hear how he's telling her, hey, well, they think you might have something to do with it. No, I've been here. I've been up here since Wednesday. Are you sure? You sure, Nicole? Oh, yeah. I've been here since 6 o'clock on Wednesday. I left on 6 o'clock on Wednesday. That's when I left. Now, remember, August 20th is Thursday. That was a Thursday night this happened. She's talking to him on Friday morning saying, oh, yeah, I left Wednesday night.
You're
this
lying.
becomes a central theme in her attempt to cover up what she did. Meanwhile, phone records have been ordered for her phone. You know her phone number, they ordered the phone records, and immediately were able to find out from the cell towers that Nicole Nachtman was in Tampa and right around the house at the time of her mom's murder. based on cell tower data.
Surprise.
So the detectives decide to go up to Tallahassee and meet with Nicole Nachtman. Meanwhile, the house back in Tampa is being processed. The crime scene's being processed. Blood is found in the kitchen. There's blood spatter along the cabinets. So they're looking through all the blood and trying to figure out where this happened, what happened, what's this in the cleanup. And while doing all that, they notice on the hallway wall right next to the doorway entrance to where the body of Robert Deans is found, they notice what looks like a fingerprint. Now, it's very faint, very difficult to see, but one of the crime scene technicians you'll hear from said, I looked at it and I said, I think that's a fingerprint in a red substance. So they test it, and sure enough, it's blood. They get the fingerprint, and sure enough, it is the fingerprint of Nicole Nachtman. So up in Tallahassee, at Florida State University, the investigation continues. And while there, they find out, in talking to the administration, that she did not check into her dorm room until the Friday morning of August the 12th, 12 hours after her mom had been murdered. They also speak to her new roommate in the overflow housing, a woman by the name of Marielle Battle. You will hear that Marielle Battle is told, and Marielle Battle's coming here, she'll be testifying for you. You will hear that she's told when she meets Nicole Nachtman, that Nicole Nachtman says to her, if anyone asks, I've been here since I was here yesterday. Of course, Marielle Battle thinks that's very odd and tells the detectives that immediately when they ask her. Again, all part of her efforts to cover her tracks.
Just met to lie for you. No, thank you.
So now officers have eyewitnesses that put Nicole Nachtman at the house. They have phone records that put her at the house. And they also know that she's lying about when she arrived at Florida State University. But around this time comes one of the most compelling pieces of evidence of all. Because during this morning hour, when detectives are calling Ms. Nachtman, and her brother, Joseph, finds out word after he gets off duty that his mom has been killed, his first thought was, let me call Nicole. Oh my God, she's alone. Poor thing. Oh my God. So he calls her up. And you'll hear about that first phone call. And she's just like, we're here for you, Nicole. Don't worry. I'm getting a ticket. I'm flying down. I'm going to be there for you. Family's there. We're going to be there for you, Nicole. It's okay, okay? Don't worry about this. Everything's going to be fine. At that point, you'll hear from Joseph Carey, who will tell you that at that moment in time, he had thought, and they were all kind of into the working theory, that maybe this was a murder-suicide, that Robert had killed her and then killed himself. So, completely unsuspecting of Nicole Nachtman. Well, a little while later, he's back at the house, and he's going to make his plane reservations, and all of a sudden, he gets another phone call. And the evidence will show it's from Nicole Nachtman. And he'll say she sounded kind of happy at that moment. And he's like, hey, listen, Nicole. And at that point, he's still trying to make the plane reservation. He said, let me call you right back. Let me call you back. So he hangs up, he goes and gets the phone, and he goes to sit down to make this phone call, and she thinks this could take a while, poor thing, right? So he sits down, and he calls her, and he's like, hey, Nicole, what's up? And she says to him, I'm going to miss you, Joey. I'm going to miss you, Joey. And of course, Joseph's like, what are you doing, Nicole? Are you going to kill yourself? Are you going to kill yourself? And she goes, oh, no, I'm not going to kill myself. He's like, what do you mean you're going to miss me? And she says it real quietly. Her whisper, he says, I did. So you can imagine, Joseph Carey was shocked. He starts going, what are you talking about? And at that point, she starts crying and starts basically telling him everything. She starts telling him, I didn't think I could do it, but I did. I'm talking about killing Bob. I didn't think I could do it, but I did. She tells him, you can call me an animal, but don't call me a monster. She says, if I'd only gotten the good news about the housing beforehand, I wouldn't have had to do it. He doesn't know what she's talking about at that point. He remembers her saying that. If only I'd gotten the good news about the housing, I wouldn't have had to do it.
Oh, God.
She tells him how she got cold feet when she hears her mom come in the door. She's hiding in her bedroom. And again, remember, the trap is set. Her car's not there. Her mom has no way to know that Nicole Nachtman's there. She's moved the body. She's cleaned up the blood. The mom could have no way of knowing anything's happened in the house even. She gets cold feet according to what she tells her brother. And she says she climbs out her window. And you'll see the window. You'll see that it's open when the police arrive. And she says she goes to the front of the house. And she tells, just for some reason, I don't know why, mom comes back out front and she sees me. And she says, Nicole, what the hell are you doing here? At that point, she says, and I blacked out. And the next thing I know, I'm in my car. Well, we know that she's in her car because her Garmin GPS comes on right about 11:15 or so, and it starts driving. Heading straight out of Tampa. Right onto 75, and heading north to Tallahassee. The Garmin GPS is so precise, you'll even see that she stops in a rest area for a couple of hours, obviously, to catch some sleep. Gets back on, goes up to I-10.
She's tired. Took a lot out of her.
She can't check into the dorm yet. They're not open. It's the middle of the night. Eventually, you'll see from the Garmin GPS that she goes straight into Tallahassee. The phone records all confirm that. They all verify where her phone is. It's all matching with exactly what the Garmin GPS says. So not only do we have her car that we know where it's going, but we also have the phone, her own phone, that's corresponding to those same locations and same places. And that's when she arrives up at USF and she checks in. Joseph Carey eventually tells the police all of that. that day, while Nicole Nachtman, by this point, has been brought into the police department at Florida State, and she's being held there. And at this point, a detective calls Joseph Carey and says, "Hey," because he's heard from family members that she called and said something to him. So they call him and he asks, "Can I take the fifth?" He doesn't want to tell on his sister. And the detective said, "No, you can't. You gotta tell him what happened." And so he tells the detective everything. At that point, Nicole Nachtman is arrested, charged with the murders of both her mom and her stepfather. And her mom, ladies and gentlemen, and I haven't even talked about the shooting, but you'll hear that the stepfather, Robert Dean, shot once in the back of the head. And you'll see where the shot goes into the head. And you'll see that there's a hat that's in the washing machine. See, clothes have gotten washed. Bloody stuff has gotten washed in the washing machine.
Nice.
The same hat that you can see wearing that photo video. In the back of that hat, a small little hole that corresponds to where that hat would be on his head. And
Why would you do that?
The medical examiner is going to testify and tell you, was shot 3 times. She was shot once
Weird.
right directly in the stomach. This shot had what's called soot or soot around it, which means that the shooter was within 2 feet of her.
It's real close.
Not too far away, pretty close range. She was then shot inside, and I'm not saying this is the order because the medical examiner won't tell you what the particular order is. But she was also shot in the side, and then she was shot through the ear, into the back of the neck, and into the head. That's the wound that was absolutely fatal. All 3 of them obviously really fatal, but that one was the last sight Miriam Dean saw was her own daughter, her own flesh and blood, with a gun pointed at her and shooting her. That's what the evidence is going to show you. That was the last thing she saw. At the conclusion of the evidence, ladies and gentlemen, you will see a woman who knew what she was doing as she executed her plan. And not only did she know what she was doing, that's very obvious, and you can see how she executes that plan, but she knew the consequences and wrongfulness of what she was doing by covering her tracks, by fleeing Tampa, by making up lies. She knew that she was going to be in trouble. She knew she was going to get arrested. She knew she was going to go to jail. And she knew it was wrong to do what she did. The state has no doubt, upon hearing all the evidence in this case, you will find the defendant, Nicole Nachtman, guilty as charged of 2 counts of first-degree murder.
I think they're okay. That was the state opening statements. This is the defense opening statements. Lady, you dropped your thing. It should pick it back up.
Your Honor, counsel. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to remind you of just a couple of things. And obviously, one of them, the judge has already instructed you on that what the lawyers say is not evidence. And I am not going to go through a detailed presentation about evidence at this point and witnesses in the same way that Mr. Terry has done. But I want you to please keep in mind that which we've already talked about, where you should not be at this time forming opinions yet or making decisions in your mind because you haven't really heard, not the one first person take that stand and testify. I also want you to know that sometimes as I go here today and I start speaking and speaking quicker, I might forget to say that the evidence will show or that you will hear. Please don't take in any way whatsoever that what I'm saying is an adamant aspect of things. Remember that it is going to be my obligation and Ms. Hersey-Folguera's obligation on behalf of Nicole Nachtman to prove to you everything that we're telling you in opening that we believe that the evidence is going to show. You obviously, at this point, understand the importance, and I'm imploring you at this time to keep that open mind that we've talked about before. This is a case where every single day, you are going to hear significant testimony and evidence that is going to explain to you how Nicole Nachtman went from this type of a day, this type of an atmosphere, this type of a life with her brother Joey, who you will also hear from in this courtroom, to where she was ultimately arrested. And she sits here today in this courtroom facing 2 extremely serious charges. I know it's very hard to ask you to not reach conclusions based on what you have heard, but I want you to understand that it is my intent and that of Ms. Hersey-Folguera to provide to you a full picture of Nicole Nachtman's life so that you will understand how you go from being born and being brought into this world by parents and then ultimately sitting in a courtroom as we are today. You're going to hear from family members. You're going to hear from loosely friends and or individuals that Nicole Nachtman knew at FSU. You're going to hear experts that are going to testify, and they're going to testify and tell you that they've talked to individuals, that they perhaps have spoken to Ms. Nachtman, that they have reviewed records, not records from August of 2015 forward. In other words, not from the day that Nicole Nachtman was arrested and charged, but from way back when Nicole Nachtman came into this world, as every person does, with the hope of happiness and the hope of a future that would have taken her somewhere other than a courtroom in Tampa, Florida. You will have independent corroboration of the things that affected Nicole Nachtman's life. And the reason that I say independent corroboration is because quite often people will say, well, but that's from the defendant. That's what the defendant says. This and the defense. It's going to be listened carefully to everyone, because you're going to have an opportunity to hear so many people that really knew Nicole through either their family, through FSU, or really through things that most kids don't even want to go through, and that is psychological evaluations, social and psychological reports when you're in elementary school. You're going to find, as we give you this picture and as we walk you through this life of Nicole Nachtman, that one of the things that you will have to determine is what was happening that led to the deaths of Miriam and Robert Deans. Where was Nicole Nachtman at the time? And if in fact there is a justification for the deaths of Robert and Miriam, and that's hard. Just as Mr. Terry just said to you, can you imagine being killed by your daughter? I'm going to tell you right now, the things I'm saying to you is not to paint a brush, to just gain your interest today or to garner sympathy. This is because there is an obligation to tell you a full and complete story, to tell you how and why Nicole Nachtman's life and her experiences and the things that she went through led her to develop a mental illness that is real and that exists, that created a psychotic break that resulted in the death of Miriam and Robert Deans, her mother and her stepfather, in August of 2015. Nicole Nachtman is and was a broken individual, young child, young lady. Wherever you start, she is and was, and it started early on. She's broken because she was a biologically vulnerable child who lived in chronic turmoil and instability. Common sense tells you that from the time that you were born and brought into this country and into this world, your development actually begins. Everyone knows the importance of everything that happens to you as a child when you're born from day one. Early on, bodies, brains, they're susceptible to stress, they're susceptible to trauma. Nicole Nachtman's childhood was marked not by a contested type of atmosphere, but by a warlike custody battle from the inception, from her conception, as a matter of fact. Suffering through abusive acts and disappearing support systems. Her father, her biological father, Ronald Nachtman, who obviously loved her and fought for her in a custody battle, was eliminated from her life due to the custody being awarded to her mother, Miriam. By most accounts that you will hear from anyone, her brother, Joseph Carey Jr., was in fact the person that Nicole was closest to and continues to be close to, who you have heard already has struggled with the position that he has found himself in this case. What you will also hear is that her brother, Joseph Carey Jr., disappeared from her life in the tender ages, under the age of 5. Again, because she was growing up in a biologically vulnerable and unstable life. In fact, what you will learn is that Joseph Carey Jr. chose to leave his mother's home because of the abusive and instability of his home life with both his biological father, Joseph Carey Sr., and his mother. You will learn that Nicole also lost her brother, Kevin, at a young age because he passed away.
Aww.
You will learn that her environment existed of going from state to state, school to school, mother to grandparent, to uncles that were trying to assist her, but there was instability. And although, yes, Miriam was working, I want you to, again, keep an open mind and listen to the things that were happening for whatever decision and for whatever reason Miriam was making these decisions. It is the impact on Nicole Nachtman that you need to take into consideration. Yes, while many of her needs were being met, you will learn that the loss of these support systems has an impact on ultimately where Nicole Nachtman is today and was in August of 2015. You will learn that she was incapable from an early age of being able to navigate through the damaging emotional and psychological environment she lived in. Yes, she had a very successful and demanding and domineering mother who refused to acknowledge that Nicole Nachtman was not as strong as she was. The evidence is going to show you that family members, close family members, not of her biological father, who's not in her life, not of Robert Deans, who's not in her life initially, but family members of Miriam herself start to have concerns about the psychological and maturity, emotional development of Nicole. Yet no one had the courage to intervene, and no one had the courage to talk to Miriam about the things that were going on. You will hear that these comments and concerns were even expressed by other individuals in the voluminous records that exist that experts have relied upon. You will have teachers, you will have doctors' evaluations that recognize the deficits that existed from Nicole's early on stages. The reasons for this will become more clear for you. Again, Nicole was born in February of 1994 to Ronald Nachtman and to Miriam Carey. At that time, Nicole's mother had 2 sons already, Joseph Carey Jr. and Kevin Carey. And as a matter of fact, at the time of Nicole's conception, Miss Carey was herself in the middle of a contentious and bitter divorce from the father, the biological father of her 2 sons. Joseph Carey, Joey Carey, as he's referred to, Jr., is going to talk to you about how that relationship and how that divorce led him not to just leave, but to run away from those parents and to run away to, yes, the grandmother, the same grandmother that you will learn would take care of Nicole Nachtman whenever she was going from state to state, where she could stay, where she would visit in these later years once her mother and stepfather moved to Tampa, Florida. You will hear that our experts have relied upon evaluations by Dr. Joan Anderson that had to evaluate Ronald Nachtman and Miriam Carey, and imagine this, at the age of 3, evaluating Nicole Nachtman, a 3-year-old, because of the bitter custody battle that is going on. And you'll learn the experts noted that Dr. Anderson noted that Nicole had walked at 9 months of age. She had actually spoken some words at about a year. But she was not toilet trained by the age of 3 at the time that this ongoing bitter custody battle is going on. Is that our first sign of a lack of development of a child? So we need to listen to what is said by the experts that testified.
I mean,
During the time period of this contentious battle with Ronald Nachtman and Miriam Carey, Nicole Nachtman is going literally back and forth between her parents. She's in a number of different daycare centers. She's witnessing untold numbers of both physical and verbal altercations between her parents. And the one thing that comes out of what Dr. Anderson says that the experts relied on is that if that was going to be the relationship of the parents, if they were going to continue to have constant altercations, that things would never change between these two people, and that there would be psychological damage to Nicole Nachtman. Joseph Carey Jr., Joey Carey, will tell you about his childhood, and he will describe for you what was the difference perhaps in how I lived in my environment with my mother and how Nicole Nachtman was living in the environment with her mother, his mother, the same mother, different fathers. And he will tell you, Kevin and I had each other. Nicole had no one. Kevin and I could support each other. Nicole had no one. And before everybody says, why didn't she pick up the phone and call brother Joey? Let's think about this in the context of Nicole Nachtman's age, where Joey is, joining the military. And let's use our common sense. You're going to call the person who ran away from the same environment that you're in and has made a life for himself in a different direction. And just as Kevin and Joey may have talked about, or Joey and Nicole may have talked about, you know, mom this and mom that, your common sense will be able to tell you that they'll also be able to talk about how volatile these relationships were, how it's just not good to be yelled at, how it's just not good to be demeaned in some way. Just like Joey didn't want to be in turmoil and volatile situations, the reality of it is Nicole Nachtman lived in turmoil and an abusive relationship and did not develop and manage to find a way to navigate herself through life. And that's what the evidence is going to show to you. With her brother's death, she's now suffered the trauma of not having a father in her life, the trauma of everything that went on through that bitter custody battle, the loss of a brother who decides to leave and go somewhere where I can be in peace, and the death of a brother. Traumas, changes to her support systems. And that's in 2003. And in 2004, the evidence will show you that Miriam Deans does in fact marry Bob Deans. The evidence is going to show you that Nicole Nachtman actually attended 13 different schools before graduating from high school here in Tampa. The schools were in Virginia, the schools were in Florida. The changes were almost yearly.
that's a lot of schools.
You will hear the school records that show academic problems, behavioral concerns. You will hear that from psychological and social reports as early as the 3rd and 4th grade that the experts, again, have been relying upon. Because in the end of this, I'm going to tell you why all this is important and why I keep saying, and they relied upon, and they relied upon. You will hear that Nicole Nachtman was sent to a military boarding school right down the road here in the Bradenton, Manatee type of area, even though Miriam's family, her mother's family, lived in Tampa. And they would have readily accepted her in the homes to help her and let her live with them. And instead, she's sent to a military school. The family did not agree with the decision that Nicole's mother made. And I believe that you'll hear that from, again, witnesses. Instead, you're probably saying, well, that's Miriam's choice. She's the mother. But the answer to that question, and I want you to listen to this for the evidence to show it to you, the family had already begun to see changes in Nicole. And the changes become even more prevalent after attending the military boarding school. No longer is she happy? No longer is she bubbly? No longer is she singing and dancing, which is how Joey wants to remember Nicole. The evidence is going to show you, and the testimony is going to show you that this instability in her life, this lack of addressing her academic and psychological observations that were being observed by the people that were with her more often than her mother, her family members, teachers, doctors evaluating her. Still no intervention, still no treatment. we've just let Nicole Nachtman continue to go through life with these things. The evidence is going to show you that the school evaluations made very specific observations, emotional problems, a lack of focus, disorganized thoughts. You're going to learn that there was more deterioration in Nicole Nachtman's life because as she's sitting here in Tampa, Florida, attending the 7th grade, making pretty good grades, A's and B's, living with her grandmother, her mother takes her and moves her to Virginia and has her repeat the 7th grade. You will learn that her emergency school contacts changed often, depending on where she was going to school and depending on who her mother chose to have as the contact point during that time. Again, that shows no stability. The evidence is going to show you that stability lacks 4, shows you that a gathering of information about Nicole Nachtman and her needs, her challenges, the situations that are happening to her. You will hear that people are not acting upon it, and some of her own family members will say, I didn't even know about all of that. You will hear that when Nicole Nachtman was in school, in high school, one year, here in Tampa, Florida, at Sickles High School, in close proximity where her maternal grandmother, Miriam's mother, lived, and where uncles were close by, you will hear that instead the decision that Miriam made was that Nicole should live in an apartment alone. You will hear that her family will say that they would call her and check on her because, again, that was something that they did not necessarily agree with. It's because they were observing at this time that Nicole was having difficulty navigating through daily routines, through school routines. You will also hear the neighbors that are going to testify, the neighbors of Bob and Miriam Deans, where Nicole would spend the summers and her breaks. You will hear them say they never saw any friends coming and going of Nicole's age. You will hear her own family members tell you they don't remember any friends or relationships that Nicole created, with the exception of maybe one in this entire time. You will hear family and FSU individuals, loosely again, the friends, the roommates, talk to you about her life. You'll hear the family talk to you about what they perceived as bullying incidents, where somebody would take her computer and she would just do nothing about it, speaking about Nicole, to the extent that her uncle said, just tell me where this child lives, where this kid lives, and I'll go. All of these things are happening in the life. And Miriam's response to that type of an incident, I'll just buy her another one. So yes, did she have another computer? The answer is yes. The point here is, again, having to react to those things that a child expects you to do for them as a parent when they're going through the difficulties that they're going through in life. You will hear about her obsession, Nicole's obsession, not only with computers, but with, for instance, the movie called Frozen, with the character Elsa. Her obsession with a fear of having to do things in the manner in which her mother wanted them done. In other words, perfection. A common phrase that the family comes to hear from Nicole Nachtman: "Don't tell mom. Don't tell mom. Don't tell mom that I'm here, or don't tell mom that I spent $75 buying some type of sword. Don't tell mom this, don't tell mom that." That became a phrase. And again, what did anyone do? They didn't tell mom.
Don't tell mom I bought a
But
sword.
they also did not take it to the next step. I say, Nicole, what is wrong? What is going on? You're going to hear that in 2012, Miriam Deans buys her house in Tampa, Florida, moves to Tampa with Bob Deans, who has been for 11 years at that point in 2015, Nicole's stepfather. Yet you will hear from the testimony that not anybody really knew very much about Bob. They really, you get David Lear is going to say, well, I used to go over there once in a while and help him with projects. And he's going to remember one instance about a week before. But I want you to listen carefully to the cross-examination of Mr. Lear so that you can determine for yourself just how much there is to know about Mr. Deans. Within that year of Miriam finally coming to Tampa, getting her home here, Nicole Nachtman's graduating from Sickles. Graduations are a tremendously important thing in a high schooler's mind. And if you're going to go to a graduation ceremony, you want your friends and families there. You will hear that Nicole Nachtman's no friends,
Family.
and the only two people at her graduation were her mother and Bob Deans. No other family members, even though they live in Tampa, Florida. And you're going to hear about a specific incident that occurs that, again, goes towards the abuse and the demeaning of Nicole Nachtman. Why this is important and why I say these things is because the reality of it is you're going to hear that the relationship between Miriam Deans and Nicole Nachtman seriously interplayed with Nicole's development of mental health deterioration, to her psychotic break, and to this courtroom. I don't say these things lightly. Don't think it's not uncomfortable to talk about two people who have tragically died. But a damaged person sits here today, and the evidence is going to support that you're going to hear. The tragedy is real. It comes from many witnesses that will walk you through from her birth to the onset of a number of red flags that would have led someone to believe there is something wrong with my child and I need to do something on her behalf. Something that then leads to a psychotic break and ultimately, yes, ladies and gentlemen, not guilty by reason of insanity. And it's there. I want you to understand that. I accept, as does Ms. Hersey-Folguera, that responsibility, and we will present to you the evidence that you can follow and that you can yourself judge in that respect. The evidence is going to show you that the physical incidents, the psychological incidents, the biological family pathology have brought us here just as much as what Mr. Terry said to you, the acts. Because I want to remind you what we talked about earlier. Insanity is going to apply after you make your determination to the charges and the elements and what the state of Florida has proven. You will hear from Joey Carey. And yes, the state is going to call him. And depending somehow on how the courtroom operations work and how we do the evidence presentation, we may very well have to call him back to the stand as our witness. But the reality of it is he's going to testify, and he's going to testify absolutely as it relates to his conversations with his sister. And he's also going to talk to you, though, as I've indicated to you, about the life, about his observations of Nicole, about how she spoke to him, her tone, her demeanor when she was talking about the death of Miriam and Bob, about how lonely she felt and how unsupported she felt and how she needed help. You will hear everybody is talking about she gets into Florida State University. She's off to London. She did pretty well there. You'll hear conversations between Joey and Nicole where she, on the other hand, describes what was really going on with her in London, that she was already starting to hear the screaming in her head. She no longer had the adult supervision. She was having to care for herself. You're going to hear from her roommates shortly after returning back from London. And so think about this timing. We're not talking about 2004 and 2015. We're talking about 2013 happening already. Her roommates will tell you, her suite mates will tell you, people that met her there will tell you, no parents or friends helped to move her in. Her hygiene was so bad, she literally smelled. They would find her sleeping in study rooms when it was clearly prohibited, even though she had her own room. They would find her sleeping in a bathroom, in a different hall. And they would say to her, the room over there that you have, how unhappy Nicole was that her mother was controlling her major. That she had controlled it from before she applied and was continuing to control it.
So I'm confused. If her mom was so controlling,
so that her mother would not know that in fact she had gone from A's and B's to F's. Her roommates will talk about her inability and lack of relationships. She had one friend that you will hear from that will testify. They will talk to you, however, about her obsession with Japanese anime. This obsession with Elsa and Frozen to the extent that she actually dyes her hair because she wants to look just like Elsa. And not just for Halloween night. We're talking about over a period of time. Her roommates will discuss with you Nicole's reaction to the phone calls made by her mother. And that although they couldn't hear the conversation, that it was very clear that Miriam was yelling at Nicole. The fact that Nicole would rent a storage location because she could not remember if the bike that her mother had bought her to take to FSU had been lost or stolen. And so instead she came up with, let me just get a storage unit and tell mom, all my stuff is there during the summer break, including my bike. Of the inability of Nicole to even navigate where to park her car because it had gotten either parking tickets or towed, because apparently when there's a football game at FSU, everybody has to reshuffle themselves in some way. And Nicole couldn't even navigate that, so she would leave her car at a person's apartment complex, not just for the day of the football game, but for days and days at a time. What was happening to Nicole Nachtman in her FSU days was that this already damaged girl with the mental health red flags that had been identified for years by outsiders.
she did not want to say mental health.
By interested, objective outsiders who were responsible for her well-being in the school systems or in the court systems, was now on her own with a demanding schedule, much different than the schedule in London. As you will hear that Nicole will talk to you about, it's better for me if there's an every other day class instead of every day of classes, because then it gives me some empty time so that I can live in my fantasy world instead of the world of FSU, classes, education. You see, ladies and gentlemen, her deterioration started early on and her coping skills were never developed. There was never any mental health intervention. You will learn and hear that even when it was suggested, whether it be by any family member or a school system or a doctor, that there was never any follow through. And instead, what you will learn is that Nicole's mother instead focused on Nicole Nachtman's physical appearance. At the age of 19, Miriam Deans paid for her 19-year-old child to undergo 2 liposuction surgeries. Although 5'2" and weighing 130 pounds, that was the decision that her mother made.
Aw.
You need liposuction.
I want
Nicole did not
liposuction.
want the surgery, but she complied. And if you're asking yourself, why didn't she just say no? She's 19 years of age. Because after years of incidents,
Well,
after years of
yeah,
abuse,
she
after years of no
can't.
development, and instead deterioration, that's just not an option for Nicole Nachtman. And Mr. Terry has already alluded to that around the 2015, and that's absolutely true, in 2015, during the summer months, Miriam Deans wants Nicole to have LASIK surgery instead of wearing glasses. The evidence is not going to show you that Nicole didn't just want the surgery. I didn't want it. She feared the surgery. David Lear tries to convince her together with Miriam, oh, it's no big deal. Miriam even asked Joey Carey, why don't you try to convince your sister to do this? No, Mom, she's afraid of it. She's afraid of it. Again, the evidence is going to show you, however, that that's just not an option for Nicole Nachtman to say, I don't want it and I'm not going. You're going to see evidence that the appointment had already been set and scheduled. If you're questioning the impact of influences of Miriam on Nicole, and you're wondering, well, so what? You say no, or you run away from home, or you do whatever you do. Whatever all these alternatives are that someone thinks that a 19-year-old in Nicole Nachtman's condition, or at her immature, lack of developed stage, if you're wondering about that, you're going to hear from Joey Carey himself that is going to tell you that in 2011, he's living in New York with his own world, his own family. And Miriam says, I want you to let Nicole come and live with you in New York. And as a matter of fact, I want you to live in a certain area, a certain school district.
Smart, bro. We'll see if she goes back to whatever she was saying.
So, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to hear from Joey Carey, and he'll talk to you about a time period of 2 years where he and his mother did not speak. And he will tell you, perhaps in his own words, why he was not speaking with his mother. You're also going to hear from the evidence and be able to use your common sense.
Didn't get to talk
There's
about.
no doubt at the time and during this time period of Nicole Nachtman's growing up that she needed guidance. She needed serious guidance through her life. She needed stable guidance. She needed someone to embrace her physical appearance and not someone who would instead demean her appearance. She would need someone to develop her self-esteem, just as any child would need that from their parents and or their caregivers. Someone who would see the signs of mental health deterioration and provide not only the intervention to provide for basic life skills, but a way for her to truly be on her own if you're going to send her to be on her own. Is room and board important? Of course. Am I going to ever say, or is Ms. Percy Bulgara ever going to say that there was not a nice house that began in 2012 here in Tampa that you're going to see, that Nicole literally lived in for a few months before she was off to London? That the house had a nice pool? That the house had a lake? There were dogs and cats? Of course, that is going to be the evidence. But you're also going to hear from family members that Nicole Nachtman was an introvert, shy, awkward, preferred to be by herself, preferred to be in her room, preferred to be in her computer. and that there had to be reasons for that, and that there had to have been red flags that went unanswered, that
Lots
she
of
was
people
becoming more
do.
broken, that she was becoming more deteriorating and vulnerable. In London, the expert testimony will tell you that they relied on what Joey Carey said to them about his conversations with Nicole. And let's remember about the conversations that we're talking
Can
about.
you
We're talking about the
speak, lady?
conversation where he is talking to her about the death of their mother, and the stepfather. That is between brother and sister. It is not with an attorney. It is not with law enforcement officers. It is not a conversation where she is doing anything but telling her brother, this is what's been happening to me, Joey. This is what's been happening to me. And when everybody says, why didn't you say something to Joey? Joey knew when he had to, after spending the month, Joey knew that he had to drag her from the home to take her out, because all these other things, all these other observations that were being made were real observations. She told Joey not to tell Mom something. So please, don't be distracted and derailed by this, that Nicole Nachtman, the broken, damaged child, should have done this, and this, when everybody else around her is older, more mature, more developed, does not suffer from mental health illness, has not had a psychotic break, or had no red flags in their life. We're not crying out for help. And so let's of course get to August of 2015. What I believe the evidence will let you
Oh no.
hear and perhaps see in some circumstances shortly before the death of Miriam Deans and Robert Deans. I anticipate that the experts will tell you that they relied upon a statement made by Nicole Nachtman that about a week before the deaths of Bob and Miriam, maybe a little bit longer, Miriam Deans actually found Nicole in her room with the gun and sleeping pills. And she asked Nicole, do I need to get you help? And Nicole said no. And Miriam's response was to teach Nicole how to shoot that gun. Are these circumstances a cry for help? A first indication of suicidal ideation? We believe the evidence will show you yes. You also have opportunities to use your own common sense about that type of a scenario. And at the same time, the evidence is going to show you that yes, it's very true. In her deteriorated condition, with her vulnerabilities, with her inabilities to navigate through the simple things in life like taking a bath, of knowing where to park your car, of knowing whether you lost your bike or it was stolen. She could not navigate the process of how to obtain housing at FSU, and had in fact discovered, my stepfather and my mother are expecting me to leave and go. Because of the deterioration in her mental health,
She couldn't navigate all those things,
she
but she could
became
figure out how to
fearful
kill
of how
people.
her mother would react to this, once again, failure on her part to do what she needed to do. A telephone conversation between Miriam and Bob shortly before Bob's death raised more fear in Nicole because of what she heard on Bob's part of the conversation. For Nicole, the pressure's building, and you're going to hear an expert testify to you and share with you exactly how her childhood affected her life and was in play during the time period of August of 2015. That expert testimony is going to be given to you not only based on their training and experience, but on a review of substantial long-term family court records, school records, psychological records, depositions, police reports, interviews of Nicole Nachtman, not just by them, but interviews by others. You will hear very specifically what are the characteristics of mental illness and how do you come up with a diagnosis? And you're going to hear that it is done through what is called, in our world, a DSM-B. It's a Diagnostical and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. It is something that has been adopted and is renownedly used
The
and known across
DSM-5.
the field of mental disorders
Might be the DSM-4.
by the American Psychiatry Association.
I don't know.
It is, in other words, the word in this area. I didn't mean to do that. That expert testimony is going to show you and explain to you how in the days leading to the deaths of Bob and Miriam, Nicole Nachtman was being delusional and suffering from suicidal ideation. And in fact, her delusion was that her mother was really going to kill her based on her prior experiences and the psychotic breaks that are starting to happen. The expert will give you an explanation of how Bob Deans was in fact killed while Nicole Nachtman was in a psychotic state. They will provide you the opinion, but they will also direct you to the specific characteristics and the specific instances in Nicole Nachtman's life that tie in directly to the specific characteristics of the mental disorder. You hear that Nicole Nachtman scrambled. You'll hear that the diagnosis of schizophrenia and its DSM-V characteristics, such as disorganized speech and thoughts,
Oh, DSM.
will be provided to you with specificity. And
that
you will have
four?
tangible
B4?
things to touch for this, not just the expert.
Hell, I don't
Nicole
know.
Nachtman will be
I'm
described in
not
certain
Roman.
instances by more than one expert, that she can ramble and be derailed, that her demeanor and conduct can have an inappropriate affect, ranging from childhood silliness to unpredictable agitation. Again, characteristics provided in the DSM-V, characteristics of the diagnosis of schizophrenia. That Nicole Nachtman, in ranging from laughing and giggling to shouting and being completely upset and distraught, almost on the turn of a dime. Again, characteristics. Past behaviors, again, told by people other than Nicole Nachtman herself, independent people, that she would stay up all night and sleep all day. And clearly a problem with that is she's in FSU and supposed to be in classes. And when she is up, she's on a computer. You're not hearing that she's going to classes. Nicole Nachtman suffers from schizophrenia. And remember, these symptoms are occurring as early as when she's hearing the screaming voices in London in 2013. Not post August 2015, when perhaps Nicole Nachtman has met her two lawyers. So watch for anything or any intent to derail you on that thought process. These are all things that are happening before the arrest of Nicole Nachtman. The expert's also going to share with you what are called negative symptoms, such as abolition, the severe lack of capacity or initiative to accomplish purposeful tasks, such as attending classes, attending to your hygiene, instead of being obsessed on a computer and living in a fantasy world, doing things that are clearly not matching up to what your chronological age is. The expert's going to tell you that he does rely on things that Joey Carey has said. Again, Joey Carey, who, although, yes, he wants to protect his sister, he also has, in fact, told law enforcement, talked to the state attorney's office, talked to us about the conversations that he had with his sister. In other words, the bottom line is daily life, daily challenges, daily needs, daily movements are difficult for Nicole Nachtman. She does not operate in the adult world in a successful way.
Join the
If
club.
you don't tell her to shower, she won't. If you tell her you smell, stop it. Even if it's going to affect a relationship with somebody, she doesn't have the capacity to change. You're going to hear that from one of her former roommates. Some will tell you, perhaps, that these are all just signs of depression. It could be signs of depression, and the answer to that is yes. But you will hear expert opinion, based again on education, experience, the DSM-5, that about half the people who suffer from schizophrenia, in fact, suffer from depression also. And the symptoms would mean of both. The words of Nicole Nachtman, where she says, and explains London and says, the normal FSU classes where you have to go to school every day, it's not good, but empty space for your brain to reset and procrastinate or take a break and go into a fantasy world. And in her own words, a lot of time I did not want to come back to reality. And again, those words are words that she is speaking to her brother at the same time that she's telling him about the deaths of Miriam and Bob. So it's an entire conversation, not just about one thing. And her brother will confirm that that's in fact what she said about nightmares, about screaming voices, about an inability to control the nightmares and the screaming voices. And he will tell you that what Nicole told him was, yes, I was trying to leave. On August the 20th, I was trying to leave. I went out the window. But I ran into Mom. And what she said to me is, not what the heck are you doing here? Not what the hell are you doing here? But what the F are you doing here?
She didn't expect her to be there.
And Mr. Carey, based on what he heard from Nicole telling him about what happened on August the 20th, with the impression that Miriam confronted Nicole. And Joey will even tell you that his impression was that Nicole just didn't even seem to understand that being arrested was a big deal. And why is that? And that is because her thought processes are nowhere in the reality world. As you will hear from an expert, as you will hear from the characteristics of her illness.
I don't doubt that.
Nicole herself describes her college life as a fantasy that's blurred with reality. Nothing to focus on. The evidence is going to show that she told her brother, I have no compass, I have no map, I have no direction. But fantasy is something I'm very familiar with. It's a plot that is going somewhere to a
killing
degree.
them was
And the
a
question is,
fantasy?
does this sound like she was doing well in life? Does this sound normal, or does it fit into what the experts will tell you is the disease, the defect, the diagnosis of schizophrenia and its symptoms and its factors? Our expert will tell you that it is classic schizophrenia. How
Oh no.
he sees that based on a substantial amount of opportunity to observe her affect being all over the place and grossly inappropriate, her dysphoric mood, the knowledge of disturbed sleeping patterns corroborated by people other than Nicole, anxiety, which is extreme for Nicole, a reduction in attention, which is shown by what is happening to her in her days at Florida State, deficits in her ability to even infer the intentions of others. That factor in and of itself, the expert will tell you, played right into Nicole's belief that her mother was really going to kill her because she didn't have housing, based on all the other things that had happened to her in the past and how her mother had reacted. You will hear that even today, the opinion will be that Nicole Nachtman can't perceive very well what other people are intending. She has a lack of insight, which is the most common predictor of a poor prognosis, a poor outcome for this illness, because, ladies and gentlemen, Nicole Nachtman doesn't even understand and accept that she is mentally ill. The expert will tell you that this mental illness did not come on in August of 2015, but in fact is supported by the slow and gradual development of all the symptoms that can be identified throughout her life. Her symptomology, in the expert's opinion, started at least in the 3rd grade and perhaps earlier during the bitter custody battle. In and out of schools, bullied, doesn't fit in, red flag, psychological problems, no treatment, no intervention, not even discussions other than the one time involving the gun incident, and the intervention there was to show her how to use the gun. Situations such as her school going down the drain can clearly be associated with the symptoms of schizophrenia. You will hear that the experts even relied on that Nicole had a job once. She had a job at McDonald's that she loved. Best thing in her life. But she could only do one task. And when there was a request to move from one task to another, no good, I'm good. I'm good. The evidence will show you limited social contact. Has never been on a date. Has never kissed a boy or had some type of physical relationship. She liked someone once and ran up to him and told him that she thought he was cute and then ran away immediately. That's been her one reach out. No idea what he was going to respond. Why? Because the expert will tell you, in Nicole's world that she was living in, based on the abusive aspects of being, your personal appearance is important, that she didn't think anyone could like her. The expert will also explain to you that based on his experience, his education, his training, that early 20s is a common age for a psychotic break to occur. And that the lack of the nurturing environment, the abusive circumstances of her life, the lack of a support system, the lack of adequate treatment led to the deterioration of her mental health, ultimately to a full-blown mental illness, diagnosis schizophrenia, and that the years of deterioration, the mental illness, her suicidal ideations, her fear of being killed, her delusions, and a psychotic break support the defense of insanity as to the deaths of Bob Deans and Miriam Deans. And we're not really supposed to go back to the jury selection process with specificity, but in an abundance of some respect for the time that we are at today, I would be talking to you about the insanity defense jury instruction that I believe that at some time the court will read.
This is about insanity
I'm
too?
standing here today to tell you that our expert will in fact provide that evidence.
Well, this
So
is
you may be
cool.
wondering, why am I so focused on Miriam Deans? Why am I not talk to you about Bob Deans other than tell you that they've been married for 11 years? And you may be waiting for me to tell you what's the evidence going to show you. And I think what the evidence is going to show you that, yes, they married in 2004. They lived together for 11 years. The majority of the time,
They're
Nicole
going
Nachtman
to
is not
claim
living
insanity.
that environment with them. And for those 11 years,
That's
even if she
just
was living
got
with them for a portion of that time, let's say
more
let's even
interesting.
go to 90. She's bouncing from school to school, because remember what we talked about. She's bouncing still from parent to grandparent and from home to home. And she is, again, a young person waiting on her life skills and her development, and for someone to intervene on behalf of obviously her lack of development and the mental health flags that have been thrown up. So what that means is that if in fact Bob Deans was actively engaged, just like Miriam Deans was, and I am not in any way suggesting that any evidence that I or Ms. Hersey Polgara intend to give you will support that. But if you were to get there, then two parents, could you just, if you don't mind, I'm sorry, but it's very distracting to me. Two parents failed the broken, vulnerable child who had deteriorating mental health, and who sits here today with an expert that's going to testify that she has a true mental disorder called schizophrenia. I will accept that, because that means two, her stepfather and her mother. I would suggest to you that the evidence is going to show you that he was not involved in the day-to-day raising of Nicole, in her care, in her development, or in her nurturing. Instead, I believe that Bob Deans also lived in the same environment, in the same home that Nicole did, where you had a successful, controlling, domineering presence in Miriam Deans. I would suggest to you that the evidence will show you that Bob Deans did not become or supplant in any way Ronald Nachtman, her biological father who was excluded from her life, and become her protector, or in any way the person that Nicole could go to and say, Bob, I don't want LASIK surgery. Can you tell mom? Bob, I don't want lipo. Can you tell mom? Because instead what you heard was that people are going to testify that Miriam went to them seeking their help on those issues. Nicole Nachtman was alone. She was psychotic. She was insane. And this was a result of, unfortunately, an upbringing that was what it was. Something that I can't control and no one else in this courtroom could control. And she should not be faulted for not having the ability. Thank you, Judge. And we should not look for evidence that says that Ms. Nachtman had an obligation to raise herself, to get herself psychiatric help, to get herself intervention, to get herself basic life skills.
She was 20, right?
Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Hersey Folgera and I are convinced that at the end of everything that you are going to hear and see,
At what point?
Mind and keeping to your commitment to follow the law that is supported by the evidence,
Pinched
that you will
myself.
find that Ms. Nachtman was in fact insane at the time of the deaths of Robert and Miriam, and had been abused and battered throughout her childhood and her life. Thank you very much.
Nicole, can you move this so that I can see my screen?
Which one? Oh, yes.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a break. I know that it is 4:56, so almost 5 o'clock. What I want to do, though, is we have some witnesses outside, and I'm going to talk to the attorneys about them, how long they're going to take.
Okay, so here's my thoughts so far. Okay, on opening statements and whatnot. Okay, so defense is gonna play the whole insanity thing. Okay, my only issue with that is A, no, and B, at what point does it stop being a parent's responsibility to raise their children? Like, at what point does a parent's responsibility stop and it become like, if you've done the things that you're supposed to do as a parent, if you feel you've done all of the things that you need to do as a parent, like, when does, I know parenting itself never stops, but at what point do you have to say, okay, look, I have given you the resources and I have taught you the things. Now go out into the world and try to succeed. Okay? Now make these choices, learn these things. I cannot be with you every step of the way and do these things. At what point do you stop holding their hand and being responsible for every decision that a child makes? That's my question. Because it seems as though defense is saying mom was controlling, mom was this, mom was that. She didn't want to disappoint mom anymore. She thought mom was going to kill her. But then again, mom wasn't helping her in her mental health issues. Mom wasn't getting her the help she needed. So she wasn't controlling enough. But she was too controlling in other aspects, but she wasn't controlling enough to get her the help that she needed. Now, I can see where some people, ignore mental health issues, which I get that people do. They sweep it under the rug and they try to ignore it, which I get. But also, I would hope that the state at some point is going to bring in, okay, Nicole was evaluated from here to here to here to here. She saw this specialist from here to here to here to here. Mom did this, this, and this, and this. And these are the steps taken. Like that's where I hope that it's going for the prosecution. Now, because the way the defense is saying it is, Mom didn't have nothing to do with mental health issues. She was perfectly fine. There was no indication that she was mentally ill. There was nothing. There was no signs that she could. Come on now. Come on now. Mom being in the Army or the Marines or whatever it was she was in, Mom knows mental health issues exist. It's not that she doesn't know. So, anyhow, just a few thoughts on that one. So I think we get through a witness or two, because this is still same day, and we're just gonna run through it and see. Oh shit.
We're going to go ahead and take a 15-minute break. What I want you to do is when you come back, I'm going to ask you if there's anybody, what the earliest time you have to get out of here, if you have commitments where you have to be at, and then I will restructure within that. But I'd like to go maybe until 5:30, maybe a little longer to at least get one of our witnesses who's outside in. So please don't discuss the case amongst yourselves. Please know that you had that one young lady who had the scholarship ceremony.
She's been waiting outside.
Yeah, I know. Do you know how long your director's going to take of her? Is she a fairly short witness?
It's not that long, Judge.
Okay.
My director probably take 15.
Okay. And approximately across her.
Directly across should take more than 30 minutes.
All right, so that would take us to about, if I remember back 5:15, that's to take us till 5:45. What do you have next?
The stepfather who was also present, his will take longer.
Yeah.
His gets us 911 calls out immediately.
All right, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna ask them when they come back, what's the earliest thing you have to get out of here and see? I mean, if they say they can stay until 6 or even after 6.
Wow. Well, I want to be on camera and she's coming in and out in cuffs.
Jury's present and seated. Everyone else may be seated at this time. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, welcome back. Deputy DeVore told me the consensus was about 6 o'clock. I assure you we won't keep you past 6 o'clock. We're going to call the first witness. We just call one witness, and we'll get you out of here before 6 o'clock. So I'm going to ask the state to call their first witness.
So they'll call Elizabeth Ray.
Elizabeth Ray.
Who's Elizabeth Ray?
Ms. Ray, good afternoon and welcome. You'll come forward.
Watch your
wherever
step.
You're comfortable, ma'am. If you'll face me and raise your right hand, please. Thank you very much. Do you swear or affirm any testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth? And
Watch your
nothing but
step,
truth,
and the
so
mic
help
is
you God?
fully adjustable.
Thank you. If you'll follow the bailiff around to the ramp that leads up to the witness chair, please watch your step. When you get to the chair, go ahead and have a seat, make yourself comfortable, and then I'm going to allow the attorneys an opportunity to ask you some questions.
Oh, no, he didn't say nothing about the mic.
That microphone is adjustable if necessary.
Oh,
Thank you. Mr. Chair, you may proceed.
Good afternoon, sir.
spoke too soon.
Where are you currently living?
Gainesville?
Okay, and do you go to school there?
Yes.
All right, you living in a dorm there?
Yes.
When did you move to Gainesville?
June 24th, something like that.
So this just
Yes,
a month
this-
ago or so? Are you a freshman, senior? What's
Freshman.
Freshman. Okay. Where's your permanent address?
Tampa,
And what's the address itself, the physical address?
14108 Pennsbury Drive, Tampa, Florida.
And were you living at that address back in August of 2015?
Yes.
And how long had you lived there in 2015?
I moved there in 2007.
Who else lived there with you at that time?
My mother and my stepfather,
And what were their names?
Lena Rowe and Wesley Rowe.
And
Stop blinking your
Let me
eyes.
show you. I'm gonna show you pictures that are marked as State's Exhibits number 1A through T, and ask you if you can look through this and see if you recognize those. Let's look through them real quick.
You didn't ask if you could approach.
Look through them real quick. Do you recognize those?
Yes.
Okay. And what are the pictures of?
My house and like Miriam's house.
Okay. And were you living at your house back in August of 2015?
Yes.
And do these
She
pictures
said
fairly
that.
accurately depict the way your house in Miss Miriam's house looked on August of 2015?
Yes.
Judge, and I'm going to get these back in order so I can show them to the defense.
Are you moving them in at this time?
I am, Judge. I just wanted to get the defense chance to look at
No,
it.
absolutely, absolutely.
The defense has no objection, Your Honor.
They will be admitted. If you could just cite the number again, I got it. It was A through something. I
It's
didn't-
actually going to be 1A through T, or through A through O, Your Honor.
A through O.
A through O,
It'll
yes.
be admitted this time as a composite exhibit.
All right, thank you, Your Honor. And this is, in fact, or tell me what that is.
My mailbox
All right. And this right here, what is that
My
picture of?
in the front of my house.
And would that be your front door right there?
Yes.
And this is another picture. Is that again in front of your house?
Yes.
And is that your driveway?
Yes.
And the house over here to the side. Well, whose house is that?
Miriam's.
Again, this is a more close-up photo. That's the front of your house?
Yes.
That as well?
Yes.
And what are we looking at here?
The space between my house and Miriam's house.
So there's no fence between your houses?
No.
All right. And this picture here, is that more of that space?
Yes.
Now, did you know a neighbor by the name of Nicole Nachtman?
Yes.
Did you see her here today?
Yes, over there.
Can you identify her, please? I saw you point. Just maybe say like what she's wearing for the record, or what
Black shirt.
reflection by the defendant.
Record shots always left.
How long did she live next to you?
A couple years back then.
Okay. And did you know her mother?
Not really.
All
I
right.
just met them like the first day they moved in, really, and just saw them. I never really like talked to them that much.
Did you see Nicole around from time to time?
Yes.
Where would you see her generally? Just walking around front of the house or something?
Yes.
Were you all friends? Did you say hello to her or anything like that?
I went trick or treating with her one time.
But other than that,
Aw.
any other real contact with her or anything like that?
No,
Would you all say hi to each other when you saw each other?
not really.
Not really. But you recognize what she looks like, right?
Yes.
At the house where Nicole lived, who would you see most of the time?
Bob, I would see him outside, always like working on the pool or outside,
Okay.
just walking to the house. And I'd saw like Miriam come home from work,
So but Bob was the one you saw the most, usually around the house working
just
outside.
outside. Yeah.
Now going back to August of 2015, well, let me ask you this. Do you know what kind of cars they drove? Were you familiar with that?
Yes.
And what kind of car did you see Nicole drive? Do you remember?
A red Prius.
Now going back to August
She had
of
a Prius?
2015, what grade were you in at that time?
I was entering freshman year of high school,
And where were you going to school?
Sickles High School.
Specifically August 20th of 2015, the day of this incident. Do you remember that day and what you were doing?
Yes, I had my open house for Sickles.
All right. Do you remember what time the open house was at Sickles?
I got ready for it like 2. It was like early afternoon.
And on that day, were you home alone?
For a little,
Okay. And where was your mom?
working.
Okay. And what about your dad?
Working.
So while you were home alone, you said you were getting ready to go to Sickles.
Yes.
Who was going to take you to Sickles?
My dad, he took off work.
He was
to
going
pick me up.
to pick you up. Now, while you were there that afternoon, did you ever see Nicole Nachtman?
Yes.
When did you see her? Do you remember?
Like early afternoon, 2 o'clock.
And what was she doing?
I just saw her walk out like the side door of like, it was just like the garage side door. I saw her walk out towards the driveway.
And did you immediately recognize that it was Nicole?
Yes.
And we're talking about the 20th of August of 2015, the day you had that sickle thing. Is that
Yes.
correct? Where were you at that you saw her walking out?
I was in my bedroom, just sitting there. Like you could just like see like down the space between.
Okay. And so you're talking about that space that we showed that picture of between the two houses?
Yes.
Your window looked out into that space?
Yes. It's
And
like the last one.
And the door where you saw her come out was on the side of her house, and you could see it from where you were in your room?
Yes.
And how do you remember that, seeing her coming out of that door?
I just saw her walk towards the driveway, and I didn't think anything of it at the time.
Was it normal to see her coming out of that door?
No.
And
Why not?
how did she appear at the time when you saw her coming out of the room?
I didn't see if she was like holding anything or anything. I just saw her walk towards the driveway. I couldn't really tell.
I'm showing you what's previously been introduced as State's Exhibit 1K. Do you see your room in this picture?
It would be the window next to that one.
Okay, so I'm pointing here, so it'd be the window more
Yeah,
over
there's like
here.
another window right there.
All right, and do you see the door you saw Nicole Nachtman walk out of?
Yes.
And where's that door?
Next to the AC thing.
Next to the AC thing? Okay, like, so I'll use this pin. Is that the door you're
Yes.
referring to? That's the door you saw her come out of?
It's a garage door. I have the same one on my house.
Okay. So you went to the open house at Sickles,
Yes.
and you said it was late afternoon?
Mm-hmm.
All right, and you went with your father. Did you drive or did your father drive?
My father drove.
Okay. And was your father there when Nicole came out, or were you by yourself?
I was by myself.
How long were you at the open house?
Maybe like 2 to 3 hours.
And what did you do after the open house?
I came home, had like a quick snack, and then me and my dad played tennis and went to Panera Bread after that.
And then
Aw,
did your mom
that was a
still
nice
work all this time?
outing.
She comes home like around 7 to 8 between that time.
Okay, so after playing tennis with your dad and going to Panera Bread, did you come home at that time? Or what did you do?
Yes.
Do you recall about what time that was that you got home?
Like around 9 o'clock, I would say.
And did your dad stay or did he just drop
He
you
just
off?
dropped me off. Made sure I got in the house and then left.
Okay, now when you got home at 9, who else was in the house, if anyone?
My stepdad and my mom was out on like a walk because she always calls me grandma and walks around the neighborhood.
So she was out for a walk at that time.
Yes.
And your stepdad was in the house. His name again is what?
Wesley.
And so when you got home around 9 o'clock and you were there, what were you doing at that point?
I just went to my room and I was showing him. I got like a bunch of papers like from all like my syllabuses from high school, and I was just showing him that.
Okay. And did anything happen while you were sitting there and you were looking through the paperwork for Sickles?
I heard like 3 loud booms, but I just thought it was fireworks.
Describe, if you can, for the jury, what it sounded like, what you heard, to the best that you can. Like, was it quick? Was it slow? Was it one right after the other? Was one just the best you can describe what the sound that you heard?
I heard one, and then like a pause, and then 2 more, and then I heard like a scream.
And when you say a scream, like how did the scream sound?
I couldn't tell if it was like a male or a female.
Did it sound like a scream of joy, a scream of agony, or what? Like the description of the scream, if you can.
Of pain.
Okay. And was that right after you heard the
I
3
don't think
shots?
it was
Yes.
a good scream.
And after you heard those 3 loud bangs and the scream, what did you do?
My stepdad's like really paranoid, so he told me to go in the closet, which is like in their closet, which is on the opposite side of the house, like far away from where we heard the bangs.
Okay. And what happened when you got into the closet?
I just sat and like started watching a TV show.
On your phone or something?
Yeah.
Okay. I thought it was strange if you had a TV in your closet. All right. So while you're in there, were you worried at that moment?
No.
No.
Okay, you weren't concerned about the shots?
No, I didn't think. I just thought he was very paranoid, and I was only like 14.
Okay. Could you tell when you heard the 3 loud booms that you described, could you tell where they came from?
I could tell it was on like the side of the house I was on, so
So it sounded like it was coming from the side
the
where
left
your
of my
window is.
bedroom. Yeah.
Okay, so kind of like that area where we saw where it was kind of the middle area.
Yes.
No
It
idea.
was like more towards the front of the house on the
Okay.
left.
So you could kind of tell the direction of it when you heard it. It was outside your window, but more towards the front.
Yes.
That's the way you're describing it? Okay.
So it would be, I'm going to assume it was
Did you try and look out
her
the window at that
and
time
the
to see what happened?
stepdad as the
No.
witnesses.
I didn't think anything
that
of
they
it.
were trying to get into there, but
Now, when you're in the closet, Did you hear any moves
His
or anything else?
No.
his testimony
were you
would
in the
be
closet when you
getting
came
in the
to?
911 calls.
I stand there, like the police came in and like searched the house, and I still stood there after that. They told me it was fine to stand there.
So
I didn't want to move. So.
were you a little bit frightened when you saw the police come into your house?
Yes, I knew my stepdad called them though, so I was expecting them, but it was kind of scary because they come in with the guns.
Okay. And so with the police in the house, you decided you're just going to stay in the closet anyhow.
Yes.
Did your dad want, or your stepdad want you to, or were you?
Yes, and I
Okay.
wanted to. So.
Okay. Do you recall how long you were in the closet?
I don't know, maybe like 2 hours, 3
Okay.
hours.
I'm gonna just
Did you
stay
ever
in
go look
here.
out of the front window in your house that night after the police were called?
Yes.
And what did you see when you looked out that night?
I could see like the body. of
Oh
her.
Jesus!
Okay, and
I couldn't tell it was her though.
but you could just
They-
you could just tell it's a body.
Yes,
And where was that body?
like on the left end of my driveway.
All right. So in State's Exhibit 1C, here's the front of your house and the driveway. Is that the body you're referring to that you could see?
Yes,
And is that the position that it looked like when you looked out the window and saw it?
yes,
And again, you couldn't tell who it was. You could just notice it was a
No.
body.
yeah, because it's facing downward. I think.
Look up at the projector.
Did you ever
Can
give
you
a
not
statement to the
do
police about what
that?
you saw and heard?
Yes,
Did you, now you said you saw Nicole out your window that day. Did you ever see Bob out there during the day working in the yard?
no,
Was he normally outside though on most days?
yes, with the shirt off.
With his shirt off?
Yeah.
He worked in the yard with his shirt off?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
Do you recall, if you can, when was the last time you had seen Bob prior to that day?
Earlier in the week. This was like on a Friday, so like maybe like Monday or something.
Okay, now August 20th was his Thursday.
Oh, yeah.
So it was like a Thursday.
Objection, he's, at this point, he's meeting.
Don't leave the witness,
I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Jerry.
Let me ask you this. Do you remember what date August 20th, whether it was a Thursday or Friday?
No,
Okay, but it was later in the week, is that what you're trying to say? And you said it was earlier in the week that you saw?
Yes.
Okay.
doesn't really friggin' matter.
Just let me have one moment.
Yes.
She said earlier in the week, so she knows the day was later in the week.
Judge, I'll pass it.
All right, cross-examination.
That was petty. That was petty, old lady. It's petty, petty, petty.
good afternoon.
Let me take you back to the time when you went trick or treating with Nicole Nachtman. Remember
Oh,
that?
goody.
Yes,
Okay. Did you and she talk during that time that you were together trick or treating?
not really. I was pretty shy.
And as a matter of fact, Nicole didn't talk very much either during that time period with you, correct?
Yes,
And she was also shy, is that
Yes.
correct? Okay. And during the trick or treating, you observed that Nicole would ask people at their houses to give her vegetables instead of candy, is that correct?
yes,
And you thought that was unusual?
yes,
This trick or treating is usually for candy?
yes.
Right, and do you have any idea how it was that Nicole came to be trick or treating with you?
I think my mother invited her just because they were new to the neighborhood.
Do you recall if Miriam went with you?
She did not.
And do you recall if anyone from Miriam's family went with her that night and went with you?
They did not.
And about how long had you known that Miriam and Bob and Nicole lived in the house before this trick or treating aspect of life?
Not very long.
And had Nicole ever been at your home prior to trick or treating just to hang out or play or visit
No.
or anything? Had you ever been over to Miriam and Bob and Nicole's home
No,
to talk or play or anything of that sort?
I don't think I never went in their house.
Did, as a matter of fact, really, the two families weren't really friends with each other, correct? It was just mainly, we live in this, next door to each other, say hi, bye, things like that?
Yes,
And you were how old at that time, if you recall?
maybe 5th grade, 4th grade.
And you recall about what grade it was that Nicole was in at the time?
I knew she was in high school. I don't really know when.
You indicated, and I just want to make sure that I'm understanding, that you went to the open house that night with your dad, not your stepdad, is that correct?
Yes, he was at work.
And when you say that you went to play tennis, again, it was with your dad, not your stepdad, and then you all also went to dinner, is that correct?
Yes,
And when you came back, you indicated it was probably about 9 o'clock?
yes,
And did you notice that the red Prius was still there at the house parked there at that time when you arrived?
I don't remember.
Okay, do you recall, let me ask you this question, and there's nothing wrong with it. Did you prepare in order to testify today with either Mr. Terry or Miss Derry? Did you meet with them and talk to them about testifying?
Yes,
When was that?
3, 4 weeks ago.
Okay. Did they give you a copy of your interview with law enforcement?
Yes.
And did you take that home with you?
Well, when I went to Gainesville, I left it.
When you met with either Mr. Terry or Miss Terry, did they give you a copy of your interview?
Yes.
And did you leave the building that you met with them in with the copy of the interview?
Yes.
And did they also give you a copy of your deposition by any chance?
Yes.
And did you leave the building with that deposition?
Yes.
And it was Terry on page 14. You recall that your deposition was taken on May the 3rd of 2017. And specifically, the deposition was conducted by Ms. Hersey Fulgera.
Yes.
And there was an assistant state attorney that was there at the deposition, but it was not Mr. Terry or Ms. Terry. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Miss
Remember that there's a
Terry,
court reporter similar to what's-
Mr. Terry and Ms.
someone that's
Derry.
in front of you right now taking down things.
Yes.
You were under oath at that time.
Yes.
I'm going to show you at this time, again, page 14. And I'm going to ask you, I'm not going to put it up on.
Okay.
I'm going to show this to you, and I'm going to ask you to please read the areas that I've highlighted and see if that refreshes your recollection as to what you testified to on that date regarding whether or not the red Prius was at the home of Miriam and Bob and Nicole. Does that refresh your recollection?
Yes.
And was the red Prius there when you returned home from having dinner with your father on that date?
I'm not sure completely if I saw it or not.
Let me go again. You said that this refreshed your recollection.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you recall being asked the question, but you remember specifically, not your dad, but you, that the red Prius was there when you got home about 8:30 and responding yes? You recall that?
Yes.
And that is what is written here. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
But she also just said she
And you
doesn't
indicated
remember.
that you had seen Nicole earlier that day, and I might have missed the time. Do you recall what time it was on August the 20th of 2015 that you saw Nicole
Early afternoon.
before you left to go to
Yes.
your open house? Is that correct?
Yes.
Right. And the door that Nicole Nachtman was coming out of is a door that you believe, based on the way these homes are built, that that's the door from the garage that she was walking out of. Is that correct?
Yes. If it's the same as mine. Yes.
And about how, well, let's strike that. Did you know that Nicole had left to go away to college?
When I knew she went to
Did you know
college.
she had gone away to
Yes.
college? And during the time period that she was going away to college, did you know that she was in Tallahassee?
Yes.
And during the time period that she was away to college, for the normal every day, did you see her coming back from wherever she was going to college? Or
No.
was she living away from the home
She would come back like in the summertime.
for the summertime? All right, and so your opportunities to observe Nicole and whether or not she used the garage door on occasion was really limited to the summer. Because she only lived there a couple of years,
Yes.
or at least in 2015, the family had only lived there for 2015.
Yes.
But Nicole had been gone away to college for the majority of that time, holiday.
Yeah, I was in high school for a little too.
Okay. And let me talk to you a little bit about that. You and Nicole, when you would see each other again, either in the neighborhood or around school or anything like that, you still didn't speak to each other. Is that correct?
I never saw her at school.
Never?
No, we're like far apart in age.
Okay. But in the neighborhood, you wouldn't speak to each other.
No.
Other than being shy, both of you, was there any other reason for that?
No.
Where are you getting at?
And when you saw Nicole walking out towards the driveway, did you follow her in her path to the driveway at all?
No.
I'm sorry.
I went back to doing my homework. So.
And you were observing her through what would be an open kind of window, not open physically, but you could physically see through the window. That's how you were observing her. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is it accurate that during the day, for the most part, both houses would have blinds open and that you could see into each other's houses because there was no privacy fence?
Yes.
And you indicated that you did not see anything in Nicole's hands or any type of backpack or anything of that sort at that time. Is that correct?
No, I cannot tell.
And did you ever hear a car turn on, drive away, anything like that at that time period?
No.
Yes.
I have nothing further.
All
Thank
right,
you.
please go ahead.
Just briefly, I have a couple questions I'm going to ask them right there. Elizabeth, when just before you heard the 3 loud bangs, did you hear any yelling or shouting or any voices raised at all?
No.
Have you ever heard voices raised or shouting or yelling coming from the house next door, the Nachtman's home?
No.
The Dean's home? No?
No.
No time prior to that?
No.
And no time just before you heard those shots?
No.
Nothing further.
May this witness be excused by the state
Yes, you may.
and by the defense?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Ms. Ray. You may step down. You may be excused as a witness at this time.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the jury, it's close enough to 6 o'clock that we're not going to call another witness. I'm going to send you home for the evening. My instructions to you are the same as the instructions that I've been giving you. You are not to do any research related to this case. You are not to
Okay. Well, that is that one. Okay. Well, this one might be interesting, you guys. Might be fun. Well, not fun. I don't know. Interesting. Educational. Might get into some details of some mental health issues. That's more my speed. Well, that's cool. That was a surprise twist. I didn't know. I mean, I knew there was some indication of that, but I didn't actually know that that was going to be their defense, really. I knew that they had some evaluations and things done, but I didn't know that that was the route that they were going to officially go. So that's cool. I've never seen a case argued that way. But apparently today, in the real life, 11/28/2022, there was a case in Florida. Was it Florida? I don't know. Face eater. He ate the face off of a couple. The judge accepted his insanity plea. So he was not guilty by insanity. Jeez. I don't know. I didn't watch that one either. I was not feeling well today, and I did not do well today. So anyway, well, that's that one. Get into the day 2 of the trial, and that's going to be day 2 is going to be, oh goodness. Day 2, it's going to be that young lady's stepdad, and then a policeman and somebody named Shelby Garman, and somebody named Brandon Douglas, and then a CSI, and somebody named Jennifer Norman, and CSI Robert Durr. Hey, he was on another trial. Detective Durr. Because I remember saying Durr, Detective Durr. Okay. And then that's gonna be and then Jacob Becker and Corporal Greg Thomas are all on day 2. So it's a long day of day 2 testimony. Day 3 is going to be a bunch of other stuff. Takes care of a juror issue. What's that? I wonder what that is. More witnesses. Then day 4, we got some DNA, the school roommate. Day 5. The defendant's brother. Then day 5, Ronald Nachtman, I'm assuming is maybe her uncle, aunt and uncle, maybe. I don't know. Day 6, more witnesses. More witnesses. Oh, Kathleen. She's a doctor, and she takes up over 2 hours worth of testimony on day 6. No, shit, 3 hours worth of testimony on day 6. So I'm thinking she is a big wig. Day 7 is a doctor, and he takes up about 3 hours. So he's the big wig. And then there's another doctor on day 7. She does the same thing. So we got doctors upon doctors. Jesus. Psychiatrist. Well, I wonder what those doctors are. Because those don't say psychiatrist, but the one on day 7 says psychiatrist. So I wonder. And then they go into closing arguments. And then they go into jury instructions. And then they go into the verdict. So, yeah. That's how that works out. That was okay. Not bad, not bad. I'm going to try to keep these down below 2 hours if it fits. At least 2 to 2.5. Hopefully, I don't know, those doctor days might go over a little. I don't know. But it should be interesting. Or they might just say a bunch of gibberish. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, stay tuned. Should be interesting, folks. Don't skip ahead. Because if you skip ahead, you're going to know what happens. And that just takes away all the fun. It's not fun. It's not fun. Okay, it takes away all the... I don't know, words are hard. Okay. This has been interesting. So, there's that. Okay, I'll see you on the next one. Bye.